In the mountains of the Sierra Nevada, a small town known as Perfection would be besieged by monsters unknowingly for days. In the sparsely populated areas outside of the small town of 14 people, those existing within the sandy desert will begin to either go completely missing or be trapped where they would expire via dehydration. These unfortunates would be discovered by two handymen later as a realization dawned on them that something was out there ending people. Assuming it to be really the work of some psycho, they would find context clues that would indicate nothing human would be capable of pulling off what was being done. As they initially tried to kind of escape from the canyon, these discoveries and a closed road would seal them in with the monsters that stalk the subterranean loose earth. So today we are obviously talking about the movie that makes me paranoid to this day to walk on the ground, Tremors. Luckily there's like a lot of tree roots where I live and some good old Georgia clay. So let's discuss what these creatures are and why they seemingly just now arrived and what makes them such good hunters. So you know the drill by now. Up on screen there'll be a timestamp for you to jump to sort of bypass a summary of this movie. But with that said, I'm probably gonna have to like sort of make this into a series, seeing as there's about 6 movies in total. And on top of that, there's an American and African version of this species and a life cycle which will progress from subterranean to ground walking to aerial, each having their evolution sort of explained in different movies. So who knew there would be so much content in Tremors? Anyhow, let's get to it. We open up our story in the middle of a desert that makes it look like you'd be thirsty in about 30 seconds flat. Valentine McKee and Earl Bassett are handymen working for the city of Perfection in Perfection Valley. This particular valley is completely boxed off from other areas geologically by mountains to the east and west and a cliff to the north that leads down to almost bedrock. And really the only road out of town is through the mountains to the south with a smaller, lesser known jeep trail. Essentially, everything around them is either a sheer cliff or a mountain of rock. After completing various jobs, they begin to drive back towards the town where they run into the new seismologist who has been taking readings of the valley. She asks if there's any blasting or construction going on in the immediate area, as she's been picking up strange vibrations in the ground despite the last 3 years of the equipment being monitored, revealing that nothing was going on that she is reading now. They tell her that they do not believe so, and then they continue on into town. Getting there, they discuss leaving as they clear a septic tank and begin arguing about how close they are to just packing up. As they do, a septic tank line breaks, showering them with, now, you know, which kind of seals the deal for them as this is the final straw. They head back home, clean up, pack up, and bolt. As they are leaving, one of the residents comes out and flags them down, asking for their assistance for work that'll take about a month, but they decline and then keep driving. Getting to the furthest outreaches of the valley, they run across a man named Edgar up in a tower. Assuming him to just be passed out from the drink, they rock, paper, scissors to see who has to climb up. Val loses and then begins his ascent. When he gets to the top, he sees that the old man is actually expired and holding a handheld. They bring him down and then to the doctor, Jim Wallace, who pronounces that he met his end via dehydration. He literally sat up there until his meat suit ran out of juice because he was too afraid to come down. Becoming more suspicious, the two handymen then head out again and try to leave. As they do, they come across Fred the shepherd. As Fred was working out in the yard, his sheep had become rattled by something that they couldn't see, and eventually he is sucked down into the earth. Val and Earl stop at his place after noticing that the pen was empty, and then as they pull up, they notice that there are just pieces of sheep everywhere. They look around for Fred before finding his hat on the ground. They lift up the hat to reveal Fred's lifeless face underneath, and apparently his body is no longer attached. Believing that a complete psychopath is on the loose, Val and Earl head up into an area where construction is going on, which, just to point out, it is far enough away from the seismologist readings, so they weren't just, you know, being jerks. Anyhow, they begin to tell the construction workers that someone is on the loose and ending people and that they need to get out of there. They take off back to town to warn the other residents afterwards. The construction workers just sort of shrug it off, thinking they're just screwing with them, and ignore the warning. They meet their ends as well by the creatures as they continue their work. Val and Earl try to warn the residents via phone, but the lines are down. As they try to exit the town once more, they discover that a rock slide has blocked the only path out of town, and the construction workers have been ended by what they assume is this psycho. They turn around, but as they do, their truck gets stuck. Popping it into gear and pressing the accelerator, they eventually free themselves of what had them, and they start heading back towards town. Upon getting there, they discover that an eel-like creature has attached itself to the rear axle, and that's what caused them to get held up. They deliberate on what they should end up doing, which they decide that they will ride out of the area on horses to Bixby and go get help for their current predicament. As they do, they arrive to Jim Wallace's house currently under construction. The night previous, as the couple sat outside their trailer, everything goes dark. When Jim goes to check on the generator, he finds that the thing is just completely gone. As he walks back to his wife, he's then pulled underground by some unseen force. His wife jumps in the station wagon to escape, but finds that the keys are gone and they're most likely with Jim. The radio is left on, which alerts the creatures that she's actually still in there. It begins to pull the station wagon underground, ultimately burying it in the process. As Val and Earl inspect the property, they conclude that they may have just missed them, but then they can hear music. They eventually walk over to the area where they uncover that the station wagon has been completely buried by something, as the music and lights are still on. Completely confused confused as to what could do this, they continue on to Bixby in search of help. As they're riding across the landscape, their horses become spooked by something. As they look around, they can't see anything in the immediate area, but Earl correctly deduces that they caught a whiff of something that they don't like. As they stomp around, eventually both are thrown from the horses as eel-like creatures grab the horses. And if you look close enough behind the horse, you can see that it's actually tied down with some sort of black wiring. Very interesting. The 90s. Proclaiming there must be like 1,000 of these things under the ground after seeing a large rounded dome beginning to form, a large worm-like creature erupts from it, immediately disproving that line of thinking. The eels that they have been seeing are actually this larger creature's tongue. They take off running from the beast after it finishes with the horses, and then it gives chase. Quickly gaining on them, they try to jump across the aqueduct, but fall just shy of reaching the other side. As they wait for whatever it is to catch them, it ends up smashing into the concrete barrier, and assuming it just knocked itself out, they realize that it's actually completely done when one of its tongue falls out and goopy saliva and blood begin pouring out of it. Rana shows up asking more about the seismographs acting weird after seeing them fall into the aqueduct, to which she notices that the beast is sitting there with its face smashed in. They move the concrete out of the way to reveal that the creature has a large head with a bony covering. Val digs out the back of the creature, revealing that it is extremely long and covered with spikes. As they are investigating the creature, another shows up to their vibrations. As it does, the trio gets trapped on boulders for the night as the worm can hear them through the rock that they'd taken refuge on. Then they eventually devise a plan that they would just pole vault across the rocks to get to Rhonda's truck. As they land on the truck, the creature immediately begins to dig underneath and take it under. They hit the gas and escape and drive back towards town, outrunning the worm, which is a pretty strange statement. As they arrive back to town, they warn everyone, all 14 people. They look at a map to determine the attack pattern, and it shows that it's getting closer and the valley is just one big buffet. As they do, the attack on the town has officially commenced. They see Mindy outside on her pogo stick and run out to grab her. When they do, it causes everyone to scatter to various buildings. The general stores attack and Walter is bitten and then dragged underground. As everyone retreats to whatever rooftops they can, two hunters, Bert and Heather, are in the rec room seemingly after just arriving home. After sitting in the rec room, they're radioed to get on their roof, but the creatures attack and it's too late. One of the creature breaks into the underground room and then begins to try to eat them. However, these were doomsday preppers, and essentially they unleash everything they have on the beast. Most of the projectiles do not appear to pierce it as deeply as needed, and only direct hits to the mouth do any damage. Eventually they turn a tool used to put down elephants, and then after 2 bursts, the creature falls to the basement floor defeated. They radio back saying they put one down as another arrives to investigate the noise. When it does, the gummers head to the rooftop in an attempt to use the same plan as before, because why fix what ain't broke? But even with the largest tool at their disposal, they cannot pierce the dirt and the creature's hide to end it. As the town hears back that they can't actually put it down, the creatures begin to investigate the buildings and their foundations. The mother and daughter's home is sturdy enough with concrete foundation, and the creatures can't sink it. The general store is also pretty sturdy, but will eventually fall after repeated attempts. The trailer that belongs to the father and son, Nestor and Melvin, is then tipped. When it is, Nestor is thrown from it and attempts to get on a tire, but is not high enough. He is pulled through the tire and underground to Melvin's horror. As the group attempts to figure out a plan to get out of there, they radio to Bert to tell him to get in his truck and go get help. After the attack that they just suffered, they realize that they won't be really around long enough for him to go get help and then get back. The worm currently at Bert's house moves around the house and activates the truck alarm anyhow, to which the truck is then taken out by the worm's eel-like appendages, meaning that it's not really a plan for anyone to get out that way anyways. As they discuss what to do, they figure that they should make a run for the cat and then hook up the semi-truck trailer, as it can pull anything, to which they actually are correct. As a distraction, they send out a mower, to which both worms give chase, and Val takes off from the roof towards the cat. Halfway there, the mower tips over and shuts off. Val continues to run, but only makes it about 3/4 of the way before he's forced to stop as the creature's caught up to his running. The group begins to make a ton of noise back at the town to get the worm's attention, and then Val is able to make it to the cat to attach the trailer. He loads everyone up from the crumbling buildings and then heads up to the gummers. Making it there, they have loaded up a small arsenal, and even as they wait for just a moment, the worms begin digging underneath trying to sink the cat. The gummers jump on and they head out towards the mountains. About less than a half mile from their goal, they see that the creatures are doing something off to the side. As they continue, Bert is the first to recognize that the ground looks just a little bit different, but it's too late to stop. The cat is toppled from the creatures digging a line in the ground that collapsed under its weight. When it does, they hold up in the trailer discussing what they should do. As they wait there though, the creatures then begin trying to bury the entire trailer to get to them. They realize that their only choice is to run. Before doing so, however, Bert drops one of his homemades into the mouth of a creature and it detonates, ending the beast in the process. After the detonation, it sent the rest of the worms scattering from the noise, and they take this opportunity to run towards the rocks. When they do, the worms move back in and the group just barely makes it to the rocks, where Bert is almost actually taken down. Afterwards, an argument ensues as to what they should do when they realize that they're actually just stuck out there, and Bert realizes that their fearless leaders took them out there pretty much just to meet their end. After the argument, Bert suggests that when it comes to starvation, he should just walk out there with one of his homemades and then let the creature take him, and then take it out with a detonation, which actually gives Earl an idea. They give it a 15-second fuse and then lassos the homemade out, to which then it is taken up by one of the worms. The ensuing detonation showers the area with worm guts as they realize there's only one left at this point. They try the same trick, but it appears that this one is smarter. It's their old pal Stumpy, the one from, he got his tentacle ripped out from the truck. It ends up actually taking the homemade, but then throws it back, to which it lands on the other pipes with just enough fuse for everyone to run. Its detonation destroys their arsenal, leaving only one left in Val's hand. The group makes a bunch of noise on the rock to get these things' attention, and it slowly recedes back into the earth. Earl makes a step, but Val stops him, saying that this one is smarter. It's not like the rest. He is correct. The creature is waiting for them under the ground. It just lost them for a second, and it's waiting for them to take a step. Val proclaims that this thing isn't smarter than them, and then takes off running with the homemade. Reaching the cliffside, the creature is barreling right towards them. Val lights the homemade and then throws it, missing the creature, but that was sort of the point. It detonates and the shockwave irritates and scares the beast. It speeds up, no longer interested in eating them, but escaping the source. When it does, it doesn't realize it's actually approaching a drop-off. It bursts through the cliff and Val yells at it, asking if it can fly. Ironically, later it can, but in this form, no it can't. The creature falls to its doom at the base of the cliff onto the rocks below. So just to wrap it up, the group celebrates, still choosing to stay on the rocks until they all realize it's safe to head back home. They go back to town and contact the authorities to come out to investigate what had happened, as Val and Earl discuss being on the cover of a magazine like National Geographic, and ultimately Val pursues a relationship with Rhonda, which wraps up the story for now. So getting a good look at these creatures, first things first, what should they be called? Well, for anyone who's actually watched the movie, we have Walter, the store owner, to thank for the name. Aptly called Graboids, they do just that, grab you and bring you down. These Graboids on average are roughly about 30 feet in length and can weigh upwards of roughly 20 tons. Most, however, fall into a range of about 10 to 20 tons. So for now, we're going to actually just focus on the Graboids. In other episodes, we will discuss sort of like the other two different species of this creature. Otherwise, this video would be like 3,000 years long. So the one we are familiar in this film is known as the American Graboid, but there also appears to be another African species that is different physiologically because of the adaptations to its environment. Of the American species, the pigment of these creatures is darker and more brown. However, which we will actually discuss later, is a genetic variant known as El Blanco. That is a completely white Graboid who, due to the possibility of genetic deficiencies, is sterile and cannot complete its life cycle. And speaking of life cycle, this creature has 3 distinct phases that all round back to what it becomes in Tremors, suggesting that these are actual immature versions of what this creature is. Born from eggs, the Graboid appears to be sort of like a larva stage, seeking nutrition from anything that walks on the ground. Adapted for a time period that it formed in, likely there were larger animals which were more common, but now it hunts smaller mammals such as coyotes, cattle, and humans. The other 2 phases of its life induced the creation of the Shriekers and the Ass Blasters, with Shriekers walking on the ground and only arising after the Graboid is destroyed. The Ass Blasters appear to be a continuation of the life cycle of the Shriekers, where they have adopted flight due to internal combustion, and the addition of wing-like appendages. Again though, those will be covered more extensively in another video. So the physiology of an American Graboid is quite a massive animal that seems to be highly adapted to its surroundings. In fact, so adapted that the only reason they appear when they do is through these preventative measures. So getting to where they came from first would likely be the best course before morphology. So these creatures are spawned from eggs which are laid by ass blasters at the end of their life cycle to sort of start the process all over again. The eggs themselves are rumored to be able to enter a sort of hibernation that allows them to hatch when the time is correct. With that said though, I do not believe that these creatures are born just prior to the events of 1990 in Perfection Valley. Instead, these eggs hatched long before, during the pioneer days when the town was known as Rejection. During this time, the mining in the area caused these eggs to hatch, unleashing these creatures. This took place in 1889, which caused the mine to be deserted as it had become too dangerous to work in. After this event, presumably more eggs were hatched, but the area really wasn't enough to keep them functional, meaning that they had to enter a time of suspended animation. This natural adaptation actually still exists within earthworms now. They will descend deeper into the dirt and then surround themselves with a sort of mucus that protects them, but also slows down their metabolism to the point of almost complete stagnation. When it does, because the earthworm can survive for quite a bit of time, allowing it to re-emerge when times are better for suitability. The Graboids, after the people's abandonment of the area, meant that the area was really no longer suitable as there wasn't big enough prey. They entered their own form of suspended animation, waiting until the time was right. And this is why they already appeared to be adults during the events of Tremors. With the construction taking place, the vibrations and a pathway were opened up from the mines, releasing them into the valley. So this would explain why even with 3 years of monitoring by seismographs, nothing was appearing until the last 3 days. However, prior to all this, it's pretty apparent that these creatures are not, say, like immortal. They still have biological processes, and I severely doubt that they could survive from like an era where the dinosaurs were walking around, based on the area's history and geological changes over time. So here's what I believe happened. These creatures likely started out as just regular carnivorous worms. After the destruction of the dinosaurs, much like any of the other animals that were around, they kind of began to grow. As prey began to get larger and the landscape in the west began to change, this would induce those changes as well. So we know that the Sierra Nevada mountains are rapidly rising. Even now, within the last couple million years, they have done so, completely changing the area. When this happened, a lot of creatures got stuck out in the west, and as time continued to pass, the prey that they were usually likely adapted to hunting, such as large mammals of the past, began to go extinct. This left less and less food in the lower elevation areas as the climate began to shift. Eventually, east and west of the Rockies, most of the large mammals were lost, which led to the extinction of the Graboids in those areas. In the Rockies themselves, these creatures would find themselves in smaller and smaller pockets of usable ground to traverse through, until ultimately it would cause some of them to adapt. Those who adapted would have the added life cycle of the Shrieker, and due to this ability to change, the Ass Blaster would form to sort of like traverse peaks. However, even in the mountains, their species would continue to dwindle, as did their food sources, with the mountains continuing to rise. Eventually, a small area in the southwest was likely the last hunting ground for these creatures, with their primary food having completely disappeared. Some adults may have adapted and hunted smaller game, but eventually the ecological upheaval of the area would be too much. The last clutch of eggs was laid as the ground became dry and sandy. These eggs would then hatch to form the Graboids later, and as we will discuss, there are still probably other clutches of eggs waiting to be activated. This suspended animation state was disturbed by humans, but luckily is still contained by the mountains for the most part. The reason is that these creatures are highly adapted to traveling through dirt and likely need a specific type of dirt. Loose, sandy soil is easiest for them to traverse through, and likely more compacted dirt or clay would be difficult. Getting a good look at their bodies, we can see that apart from their tough skin, which is almost impenetrable to small arms, this thick, callous skin is capable of withstanding hits from underground rocks and would likely be segmented like a common earthworm too, with circular muscles in the body. This would sort of allow them to undulate like earthworms do, but the longitudinal muscles would allow them to almost swim through the dirt. And it can also be assumed at this point, judging by the fact that these creatures have no ears and no eyes, they can probably sense vibrations in the ground much like earthworms can. In fact, birds actually hunt earthworms by tapping their feet on the ground to mimic the sensation of a mole in the dirt, which actually sends the earthworms going back up towards the surface. Sort of like how humans walking or horses galloping kind of sends a graboid to the surface. But it's not just muscle that allows it to move through dirt so effectively. Looking at the face of this creature, it has a streamlined skull. The bony jaw would suggest that unlike other worms, it in fact may have some internal structures, which we will get to momentarily. The jaw shape allows for dirt to slide past it and have its body move behind unhindered. The movement of the powerful muscle in the body appears to move the little bony protrusions on its side to grip the surrounding dirt, and then it can propel itself faster than Homo sapiens' running capability. These bony protrusions are known as setae, which on smaller worms is like a bristly hair. However, for the larger graboid, they are quite clearly beefed up. Internally concerning the jaw, the worm is much like any other worm descendant. The eels aren't really all that uncommon. In fact, smaller earthworms push their pharynx out of their mouth to grasp and hold food. So the worm protrusions are not like separate beasts, but instead may just be a part of the pharynx, and when the prey is pulled in, they're then swallowed whole rather than being picked apart by these extra little mouths that go nowhere. Concerning the inside of the creature, there may be solid internal structures. Surely not a skeleton like in you or I, there's definitely not a vertebrae, and there's likely probably not a giant rib cage like on a snake, but instead little anchor points of the protoskeleton may exist to keep the jaw in place correctly as it moves through the dirt, which also gives the muscle an anchor point to move itself through that dirt to boot. This would also assist the graboid with holding up creatures it's currently trying to dig under. If it were like a regular worm, holding up a house or a car or a trailer or the bobcat would make it extremely difficult and would likely flatten the worm. So with solid structures occurring naturally to give it shape, this would allow the creature to pull off these feats we see it doing, like quite literally lifting a store or a house by its foundation. These creatures would also appear to be very intelligent as well, more so than your average animal, but not above humans. I would almost compare it to the intelligence of a tiger. Tigers have been known known that if you tread in their territory, they will literally hunt you down with almost human-like skill. Like, no, really, go look up stories about tigers stalking people. There's an account of a man who hunted one, ended up wounding it, and then he couldn't kind of finish it off, so the thing tracked him back to his home extremely far away, and it continued to hunt for him. But because of the graboids' ability to hunt, they are purely carnivorous and would likely be the apex predator of their time. And due to this, all other animals were on the food list, which likely includes early men coming over from Asia back in the day, and we still kind of are concerning Tremors 1. They would have been used to holding up the weight of large creatures like mammoths, using things like group hunting based on how they move towards perfection, meaning that they are also social hunters. This intellect is displayed as well as their social ability when they set a trap for the bobcat tractor. The remaining seem to have dug a partial U-shape around the tractor as it moves slowly forward, with the survivors only seeing it off to the side. This would indicate that the creatures knew where they were going and built a trap as such in case they sort of like diverted their course a little bit. Also, being on that one side would mean that they were being funneled into the area towards the main point of the trap. So overall, these creatures likely originated after the dinosaurs, but most went extinct shortly after the Ice Age. Some were able to adapt, but as the landscape continued to change, this would not only affect their apex species status, leading to extinction, but also the disappearance of prey would lead to a very few amount of eggs remaining that we know of. After human activity brought them out of their egg dormancy, the subsequent disappearance of humans again in the area would cause them to sort of enter a metabolic suspended animation until once again human activity released them. So this is our first stage of life, and it would result in other stages which will be covered later.